Welcome to Campo and Joe, little Facebook Live. If you're tuning on Facebook, we appreciate you checking us out. If you find us on any of the other social media channels, definitely love that you tune in for Campo and Joe. Joe C. from XL Primetime, noon to 3 weekdays. My man, Coach Campo, former Dallas Cowboy head coach, and he's a Jacksonville man now. He wears more teal than he wears any of that old Dallas blue. Am I right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm a homer.
Yeah.
I'm a homer media guy now.
That's right.
I'm a Jacksonville Jaguar fan. That's it.
Yeah, I love it.
That's great. That's what it should be.
Now, you've put your heart and your knowledge into Campo and Joe and following the Jaguars. So we're going to try and talk about all the free agency stuff, which we have a few weeks to do this. So we're going to try and drill down on a handful of guys, take a look at who we think might be targets for the Jaguars. Before they can really start to look at anybody else, they got to handle their business in-house. So we're going to get to that as well. But let's do the AFC and the NFC championship games first, Coach. I hated it for Brock Purdy getting hurt. Let's just at least talk about the NFC Championship game. I thought we'd have a much better game, obviously, but then the quarterback went down.
Well, that's a shame, really, because I think that the teams were similar teams from the standpoint that they're both physical, hard-nosed, tough football teams. And I think the game would have been closer. I do believe the roster at Philadelphia is better than the roster at San Francisco. So I believe they would have won the football game, playing at home especially. Yeah. But, the way that game turned out, it's really a shame because, all the work that you put in, you lose your starting quarterback. That's a big deal. And you could say whatever you want. The second quarterback coming in is not. Yeah. It doesn't have enough reps during the week to be able to handle it most of the time.
That's true. He knows the game plan, but he hasn't taken snaps or anything like that. And it's one thing to say you lose your starting quarterback, but this was their third string quarterback, which was their starter.
Right. And Purdy, obviously had done a great job. Everybody was waiting, obviously, for the Cinderella to, not be able to fit the slipper on the foot. But he never happened. No. I mean, here he is. He had a chance to go to the Super Bowl with that team, and it's because of the roster. They've got some really good players, but now you go to your third quarterback and your fourth quarterback, and that's going to bring up a big thing in the NFL now.
Yeah, it will.
There's going to be a lot of talk about that reserve quarterback, who's number 3 and all that.
Yeah, and making sure he's available, making room for him on the roster spot, because if you're an everyday football fan, and you're not breaking it down like we are, all you want to do is be entertained.
Absolutely.
And you need to, that is the most precious position. It's a hot commodity, and there aren't enough good quarterbacks out there right now.
Absolutely. And obviously not only for that, but the standpoint that, at least of a guy, if you have to go to your third quarterback, at least he's been in the meeting room. He's seen the plays. He's seen, what defenses are doing against, that they could be doing. At least you have a chance.
Yeah,
but,
give him a chance.
When you got to go to Christian McCaffrey at quarterback, you got an issue.
Yeah, it was something else. The only other thing I want to bring up about the Eagles and the Niners, well, actually two things, but the main thing was that you and I were texting back and forth. Hassan Reddick, he was one of the guys that you identified during the offseason as a premier pass rusher. Boy, did he show off the other day, and he's basically done that all year long. That's why they led the league in sacks.
When we were talking about the draft, which started last year about September or October, I'm not sure which. But when we were talking about the draft, the thing was about those top 4. And my thought was get Hassan Reddick and then take the tackle.
Yeah.
Evan
Neal. Yeah.
Evan Neal.
Yeah.
And, as it turns out, Reddick is just, he is really a beast. He is so fast and so athletic.
Yeah.
He would have been perfect as an outside linebacker in the 3-4. So, hey, it is what it is. Yeah. He's a good player. There's no doubt about it.
And, we go into this offseason and we're going to talk about how you can acquire talent, keep talent, all that stuff. But they totaled 70 sacks, the Eagles did, during the regular season, and then have added 8 or 9 more. They're somewhere in that 78, 79 category now. And it's Sweat, it's Cox, it's Reddick, it's Hargrave, it's on and on and on.
Brandon Graham?
Yeah, Brandon Graham. They've got playmakers.
Absolutely. They've got that front. It wouldn't hurt us to get one of those defensive linemen from Philadelphia. Now, whether or not you can do it in the offseason, that's another matter.
Yeah, Javon Hargrave is available.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Brandon Graham is available as well.
Too? Okay.
Yeah, but, they've got players, and, we're going to talk about Kansas City a little bit here in a minute. I'm an NFC guy going way back.
Yeah.
Okay. And even though I'm a Jaguar fan now, the NFC East, I have a little preponderance for, and I hate Philadelphia. You know that. But it's almost always been this way. And that's the NFC is the power, tough, physical, get after you teams. And the AFC is the finesse, high-powered teams. And I'm a tough, physical, power type of a defensive guy.
And the same thing in baseball, too. American League,
that's
with
true.
a designated hitter. National League, more scrappy. They'll single you out, and they'll try and make sure that they
it's
get
interesting.
running. Yeah, it really is.
Leagues.
All right, so let's get to Kansas City. And it was a marvelous performance for Patrick Mahomes. It was one of those, can you do it? Golly, man, everybody got to witness that injury. It did not look pretty. It looked like he was going to be way less than 100%. He goes out there and he looks pretty good, and maybe played one of it, even though they didn't score a ton, maybe played one of the best games of his career.
Well, I mean, it obviously was. They win the football game on his bad leg.
Yeah.
He runs and then gets the penalty, but he ran for the first down to give him a chance to keep it going and have an opportunity to maybe kick and win. The guy's a special guy. I mean, how he only played one snap his first year. I think he played one game or one snap or something. One game his first year there, and what he's turned out to be.
Well,
and to be honest with you, I knew he was going to be pretty decent when he ran the guy out of Texas Tech.
Baker Mayfield.
Baker Mayfield.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize he was going to be this good.
Well, he ran another number one out of Kansas City in Alex Smith.
Absolutely.
And Alex Smith really didn't do anything wrong, but Andy Reid was so smart, and whoever was running it might have been John Dorsey at the time, one of those guys. But they said, okay, he's ready. He started that one game, and then they basically gave him that team.
Well, a head coach that can do that, that's why Andy's so successful. You know my story about Darren Woodson with the Cowboys when Jimmy came in the offseason after year one and said, hey, Woodson's going to start at safety. And I say, he's a rookie and he's this and that. He goes, Dave, Woodson's going to start at safety. I said, that's exactly what I was going to say. And I think that same thing probably happened in Kansas City. Andy is a smart guy. He's a good talent evaluator. And, that's history now. Yeah. I think he's the highest paid quarterback in football. Correct?
And he's right there because these contracts are coming left and right, but he is now quarterbacking a team that has played in 5 straight championship games. He's now going to another Super Bowl, his third Super Bowl, chance to win his second. We'll do this next week, but a chance to either be 2-1 or 1-2. How will he be viewed? But he has had an unbelievable start to his career, and Andy Reid is having an unbelievable finish to his career, if you think about what he's gone through.
Absolutely. And, obviously I know Andy well, and, he's gone through some tough family issues.
He has.
And he's handled that very well, in my opinion. And I know a little bit more than the average person knows about what's going on there. Right. But, he's one of those guys. He's just a leader, and he trusts the players. The players trust him. Yeah. I think he's one of those guys that tells it like it is, a little bit like Doug Peterson. And again, Doug Peterson comes out of his tree. So I'm sure he's learned a lot from Andy. And that's what you have.
We forgot to bring the party favors. Happy birthday, Doug Peterson.
Yes, absolutely.
Celebrate the birthday, and he'll celebrate the anniversary of being the Jaguars head coach on Friday. So it's a good week for him. So let's take the Kansas City win. Let's tie it back to Jacksonville. After having seen them beat Cincinnati, knowing what they went through, because they had guys that went down. Tony went down. Hardman went down. A bunch of guys went down with injury. How close do you feel this football team here in Duval is, having seen them play Kansas City and now Kansas City make it to the game?
Well, I think they can stay right with them offensively, in my mind. I think they're both outstanding offensive units.
Yeah,
I thought Cincinnati's defense was pretty good. But if Mahomes hadn't gotten hurt, they would have scored as many points against them or more, I believe, than they did against us in Kansas City, in Jacksonville. So to me, we were really close. I think, if bless his heart, if Agnew hadn't fumbled that ball and they had gotten in on that drive, I believe it would have been a ball game right to the end, like every other game in the last 7. So to me, I think this football team here in Jacksonville did a tremendous job and a great team effort for sure.
Speaking of Agnew, we'll give him a round of applause first for making it to the Pro Bowl, which is pretty cool. And I had given the funky fact question to the XL Primetimers. There have only been 3 other special teams players that have made it to the Pro Bowl: Mike Hollis, Chris Hansen, and Brian Barker. So that's 2 punters and a kicker. So it's nice to see a return guy going to the Pro Bowl, and he's still also part of the storyline as far as the salary cap goes, Coach. And I'm not doing a direct quote here, but basically he's saying, I understand that this is a business, but I want to be here. He's going to count about $6 million against the cap next year, and I hope that they figure out a way to keep him here.
Well, one of the things I think separates this Jaguar team from some of the other teams in the National Football League, including some that were in the playoffs, is they have a number of role players on this team. Their special teams unit is better than Kansas City's. Kansas City's a little top-heavy. So to me, those guys are extremely important, and those guys you want to figure a way. The Deweys of the world.
Yeah, real important.
Those guys, our special teams, number 20.
Daniel Thomas.
Clay Brooks.
Chris
Those guys are important to this football team. And, obviously you're going to try to improve your roster all the way through.
Right.
But once you pass the first line guys, a lot of it depends on whether or not they can play special teams and those kind of things. And when you find one that's special like he is, you do everything you can to try to keep him. And in a pinch, he's a wide receiver for your football team. So
he made plays in more than one way on this football team. He made 2 huge plays. You could call it 3. One was the negative huge play, but the other 2 were huge in terms of his kickoff returns.
Absolutely.
He put Jacksonville in position for the first score, put him back in position for another big score later, returned it basically to midfield. And so, and the heart of a big cat, which is what you like. He came back from a significant injury the year before, put himself back in position to make plays, and when he touched the football, it could have been a jet sweep, whatever it might have been, he was impactful.
Oh, he was a big part of a couple of those wins coming down the stretch. And, again, I think it's a little bit of a credit to Heath Farwell because, the returner doesn't do everything. Those guys up front.
Sure.
With the guys I'm talking about, some of the role player guys have really done a good job. So I'd try to keep him, absolutely. And, then you go from there. And unfortunately, you can't keep everybody. But there are certain people that are really important to your football team, and I would say he's one of them.
Well, let's get to the big names, because we were mentioning that if you're looking at rankings, top 50 rankings, ESPN put a list together. There are 3 Jags in the top 50 in their rankings. I don't recall too many years in recent memory.
Free agent guys,
where guys were leaving here and were highly regarded.
Right.
A right tackle in Jawan Taylor, who right now, he's had his best season. He is highly regarded right now. Evan Ingram, certainly a lot of people would want to be able to get him and pull him away from Jacksonville. And then you got Arden Key, who had a little bit of a rebirth of sorts as well. They're all 3 in the top 50 in free agent rankings.
Yeah, and, obviously that's a credit to Trent Baalke.
Yeah, and good coaching.
Yeah, and coaching.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, Evan Ingram was just a guy in New York.
Yeah.
And they've made him into something, but he's made himself into something as well, with what he's done. But those are guys that, you definitely want to, do all you can to make sure they're still with you.
Yeah, we did our Deweys last week, Coach, and I gave you one an award,
I know. I'm honored to be one of the Dewey Award winners.
But Evan Ingram, we gave him the Fragile. It's a major award,
right.
because he was fragile before he came here. Everyone was second-guessing him, and Doug Peterson empowered him. This offense and Trevor Lawrence empowered him.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, you've heard me talk about it before, about the fact that before the ball game, he catches these tennis balls with glasses on that make it tough for him to see the thing.
Yeah.
And that's him. And in the offseason, in training camp, he was over there when the special teams guys were working. He was over warming up the quarterbacks himself. He was usually the quarterbacks are throwing to a coach, a quality control guy, a intern or whatever. Right. He was over there catching balls. So he knew what he had to do to get better. Yeah. And I think he's one of those guys that will continue to do that and make himself even better. Yeah,
and that's the beautiful thing about it. So we don't know exactly where they're going to be able to go, but the question is, there's so many questions that are around this free agent class, but these are all good ones instead of a year ago where they had a lot of money and they had to go out and just basically try and buy players. Overspent, whatever. That's just the way it was. Now they got to make sure that they keep some of these guys here. If they start doing the math, Cam Robinson is a high-priced guy. He's coming back off injury. Christian Kirk is a high-priced guy. Jawan Taylor wants to be paid well. If you tag him, Coach, you're looking at $18 million in that neighborhood. If you tag Evan Ingram, you're looking at about $11 million and some change. You can't do all of these. You only have one franchise tag. Where would you really kind of set your priorities inside the building? Well, I think some of the discussion is going to be, can we do something with Cam Robinson? In other words, first of all, you've got to create the money. Yeah. You've got to create the cap money. Exactly. So somewhere along the line, there's going to have to be some restructuring amongst the guys that are here. And what that means is extra upfront money and push the cap out. Yeah. So those kind of things are going to have to be done. That's number one. Number two, to be honest with you, they're going to try to do a deal with everybody. But they're also going to look, and they know that they can't do a deal with everybody. So they're going to prioritize those guys based on the coach's evaluations and those type of things. Then there is a possibility with Walker Little being there that they could look at maybe Cam Robinson being a trade situation if they want to keep Jawan. Yeah. What I think is going to happen is that they're going to pay Evan Ingram. Okay. Because the price for a tight end is not out of reach. Right. Right. And then they're going to think about trying to do a deal with Jawan, and if they can't do it, they will franchise him. Now, he may not be happy, but when he looks at it, he'll get some upfront money, and he's, right at the point where he probably would get that in a long-term deal. Plus, you're going to get paid for 2 years. Yeah, if all you have to do is really go back and look at what Cam Robinson went through. Right. Cam Robinson was tagged, got the average of the top 5 salaries from the year before, which was a nice payday, was in that same range that we're talking about. Then got tagged again and went right back into negotiations and got a big deal. Now, if they were to move Cam Robinson, which is not easy because you're asking another team to take that big contract and take that big man who's coming off of an injury. Right. And that's going to make it tough if they were to move him. I don't know. And the other half of that, is it going to be tough to get him to renegotiate after getting that big deal? Because between him and Kirk, they're the two biggest price tags right and now. I think they both have to do something in order to get back underneath. Yeah. And it just depends. Money talks and everything else walks. Right. Okay, so it depends on how much upfront they give them and those type of things. And I think with the way this team finished and the way it looks like they are in the locker room, I would be more, usually I'm the opposite. Those guys are going to worry about themselves. But if you've got the right team and the right chemistry, right, and, there's a chance that you can get it restructured. And I think those guys would be amenable to it. Based on, exactly how much money it is up front. Right. If they get that cash up front, they feel good about it. They're not lopping off a lot at the end of their contract. The pricey guys are the Cams, the Kirks, Brandon Sheriff will come into this conversation. They have to make a decision about Shaq Griffin, which look, if we're reading the tea leaves, it doesn't look good for Shaq.
Right.
He was hurt. It's unfortunate. He had to go. He described it as a procedure in the L5 area of his back. They had to take some stuff out. So you can easily see that being the end of the road for him here, which will bring about a decent savings. Darius Williams, I think, counts $12 million against the cap. They're going to have to figure out some other guys that they'll be looking at. Aluakon, they might have to ask him, and they just barely brought him on a deal. And they brought Zay in on a fairly expensive deal as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is based on the fact that this is Doug's first year.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like, these guys have been, dealing with all this stuff for a while.
True.
It's going to be, hey, we had a great year. We got a chance to do something special next year. Let's agents are hard to deal with, but they still work for the player.
Mm-hmm.
And some of it has to be a factor with the way they finished and the way the team is.
So are you saying there might be a little bit of a honeymoon period?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a honeymoon, if that's what you want to call it. I think it's more, as long as I'm getting a little bit up for
front.
me, let's do something to make sure that we have the fun that we had this year.
Right. And I think the thing that you and I are caught with is that we can't start necessarily looking at all these other big names out there in the free agent world until we know where these guys are going to fit in.
You got to take care of yourself first. Yeah. That's number one.
And this being in locker rooms, being a head coach, being an assistant and a coordinator, that news of who makes what travels throughout that locker room, and it can really divide some locker rooms.
It can do this or do that very easily. That's why I never wanted to be involved in any money situations because, I wanted to be, whenever I talk to a guy, I say, hey, look, I want you to make as much money as you can. Whatever you have to do, whatever it is, we want you here, but you got to do what you got to do. Whereas these guys have got to try to, hey, let's move this here. Let's smooth this over, and give one for the Gipper.
Yeah, exactly. Which is kind of tough, especially in today's world, because not for long is what the NFL stands for some of these players. And Big Sirs preaches it all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Just because they tell you what they think you want to hear doesn't mean they're going to tell you the truth.
Exactly.
And so you got to kind of be smart about it. But there are a few really, really good plums out there that if they could pluck them and get them here, and there's something that can be sold for those players to be attracted to coming here is the idea of winning. It's amazing, Coach, that in a short amount of time, this looked like a don't go there type of place, and now it truly is, as Urban named it, a destination.
Yeah, there's no question, and that's Doug Peterson and the way they finished this year. It's going to be somewhat attractive with the financial situation here, with the taxes, and guys want to go where they're winning unless they're getting an exorbitant amount of money.
Right.
The Christian Kirk of the world didn't know that this was going to happen.
No.
But he got an exorbitant amount of money.
Yeah,
Came to Jacksonville.
Yeah.
I think the more you win, that comes down a little bit in the hierarchy.
He'll be another guy that will be asked to give them a little bit of a discount.
Right. Right.
And it makes sense. And like I said, a decent contract for Zay Jones last year, a big contract for Kirk last year, Aluakon. We're talking about three guys that have just barely been here, less than a year, because they were signed in February last year, but they are all going to be asked to see if they can help some way.
Don't forget that some of the young guys figure into that from the standpoint that having Walker Little here, that puts a little question into the negotiations as well, from the standpoint that when you're talking to an agent, let's just take Jawan Taylor, we're going to give you this amount of money. We think this is within the boundaries of what you can make from anybody else. And if you don't think that we got Walker Little here, we're not going to go crazy over this thing,
right?
But if you want to be here, we think you're getting a perfect amount of money. If that doesn't happen, we got a guy sitting here.
And that's the negotiation.
That's all part of it.
It's a negotiation tool. It's the art of negotiation. You come up with whatever you possibly can, not like you're putting the screws to them or anything like that, but you're making sure that any general manager has to be prepared for the worst possible outcome. If he doesn't do what I want him to do and he moves on, right, I got to have plan B.
Yep.
I got to be ready to go. All right, so we're going to be ready to go with all these decisions that will be made over the next handful of weeks. But let's spend a second here on Trevor Lawrence. First off, how many people get invited to the Pro Bowl anymore? Trevor Lawrence got an invite to the Pro Bowl after Snoop Huntley from the Baltimore Ravens. Huntley was the backup to Lamar Jackson. Lamar played a majority of the games. Huntley did not play a majority of the games. He didn't even play all the games that he was available for because he was he had basically had to miss a game due to injury, and Anthony Brown came in and started for him. This guy gets to the Pro Bowl before Trevor Lawrence does?
That's a head scratcher. And how about David Carr? He's not on any team. He's in the Pro Bowl.
Yeah. Derek Carr packed his stuff up and left Las Vegas, and they said, guess what? You get to come back because you're in for Joe Burrow.
Yeah. I mean, listen, the Pro Bowl has become really nothing. I mean, at least when the game was in Hawaii, guys wanted to come, and it was still a very vanilla game, and
right.
All those kind of things. And it was kind of a party when we went to the Pro Bowl with Switzer. It was like a bowl game, we just went over there and had some fun.
Yeah.
But the whole thing now is if you're all pro, now that means something.
Sure. But
the Pro Bowl, I don't know what the Pro Bowl means now. You don't even have a coaching staff coaching it. You got Eli and Peyton Manning doing the coaching.
And it's also so funny because I went back and I started looking at some of the Pro Bowlers that were here, Coach, back in the day, and there's a lot of them that deserve the recognition, earn the recognition, and I guess I kind of lost it when Blake Bortles one year made it, and David Garrard deserved it, but he also was an alternate that, they had to go through a couple of other guys that basically said they weren't going to be able to make it. They pulled out due to injury. It's more of a convenience now. If you get named to the Pro Bowl and you get to pull out, you're at least opening the door for somebody else to go in there.
Yeah, and that's good. I mean, that's one positive. The only positive is you're getting a little recognition.
Yeah. And
maybe an agent could say, hey, look, the guy made the Pro Bowl, so that puts him in the slotting system, that puts him in here as opposed to down here. I mean, that's all it is, really. And it's a little bit the same way, although I think the baseball all-star game's a little different. I think they're playing. I mean, they're trying to hit a home run. They're trying to, steal a base and all those kind of things.
And it's a game that had consequences for a while, as far as making the World Series. And I still disagree with Bud Selig's decision there, but that's just the way it went. All right, we are out. So we'll start to look at a couple of more of the guys that they have to keep in-house next week, guys that they could be going after, but we really do need to see it come together with what Trent Baalke can do in terms of renegotiation. And also coming out of the Senior Bowl, we'll take a peek at a few guys from the Senior Bowl Saturday, and then we'll give you a preview for the Super Bowl next week.
Okay, sounds good to me.
Dave Campo. Always enjoy you hanging out with me. Joe C. You can catch me noon to 3 weekdays on XL Primetime, and we'll talk to you next week.